Welcome to our first week's lecture in the Health Research HHB 3502 course, where I want to record the first lecture. If you look here on our VU Collaborate, you see there are currently 3 lectures under week 1. The first one is the one I'm currently recording. The second one here, Intro to Health Research, is the lecture I'm giving at the beginning just to explain the mechanics in our unit. And the last one is a lecture about evidence-based public health and the role of research in it, which I'm mentioning here in my first lecture. So you should look at the slides of this last lecture by yourself. Now let's focus on the objectives of our lecture. By the end of this week, you should have learned about evidence and evidence-based practice, and that is what I just mentioned here in your VU Collaborate. And what I cover here in this lecture is about the nature of research and the key concepts and the different research designs. Let's start with why do we want to do research? What is it? Why are we interested? And what are the key concepts and issues? Now, it's very clear that research permeates our life wherever we are, not only here to assist in your class, but I think foremost to evaluate the evidence, the research-based evidence behind information presented every day in the media, in order helping you to make informed decisions. And another objective might be that you want to pursue further a career in research. Why is research a valued source of knowledge? Well, there are a couple of other common ways of knowing. It could be your personal experience or intuition. It could be that you listen to some authorities, some experts, or base your decisions on cultural traditions. Or, and that's the mainstay of this course here, it's based on the scientific method. So let's explore a little bit better what is science, the scientific method, and end up with discussing what is research. Science is the body of established knowledge. That's what you find in a science library or science department, being the observation, identification, investigation, and theoretical explanation of natural phenomena. Ultimately, the goal of science is to generate and to verify theories. A theory, in turn, is a set of interrelated constructs and propositions that specify relations amongst different entities or variables to explain and predict phenomena. A theory should be simple and consistent with the observed relationships, should be tentative, so we might, with new evidence, revise our theory, and foremost should be verifiable. The scientific method involves principles and processes regarded as very characteristics of or necessary to conduct scientific investigations. It is the process or approach to generating valid and trustworthy knowledge. Research, then, is the application of that scientific method, a systematic process of collecting and logically analyzing information. Research has its methods, or altogether explained as methodology, and that's the way one collects and analyzes data, and they should be described to develop trustworthy knowledge through those reliable and valid processes. If you want to define research in one sentence, you could describe it as research is the systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of data to answer a certain question or solve a problem. Here are the key characteristics of research. Research is objective, precise, verifiable, hopefully frugal in using limited budgets, It is empirical, meaning things can be verified by observation or experience, rather than being only based on theory or logic. Despite of that, has to be logic research, and there is this element of probability in research. How could you classify research? William Trochim, on this very interesting and very useful website, socialresearchmethods.net, roughly classifies research into 3 groups: descriptive research, relational research, looking at the links between the different variables and outcomes, and causal, the type of research trying to find the cause, eliciting some effect. There are other ways to classify research. For instance, one could talk about basic research, fundamental research versus applied research. One can also separate out evaluation research or experimental research types against non-experimental or more observational types of research. Or one could group it into analytic versus descriptive versus experimental versus qualitative type of research. So there are different ways to describe and classify research. What are the key concepts and issues when conducting research? Time is a very important concept. And with that, I don't mean the time available to conduct the research, but time as a variable, as the underlying driver of change we want to observe. With that, I mean, for instance, as an example, like the before and after investigations. Before a certain event happened, this was the status, and after your intervention, a health status hopefully might have changed. We are always looking at the variables. There are different types of variables in research. As they change or as we are able to manipulate that brings us to the types of relationships between those variables, and I introduce some key concepts there. Research is about testing hypotheses. We need to learn about the different data available to research, the fallacies we might have and need to examine. Research is a very structured process and is running either in the deduction process or induction. Then certainly throughout the course we talk about research ethics, and validity is one of the other key concepts. Let me illustrate a little bit the time in research. Roughly, in terms of types of research, one can distinguish between cross-sectional and longitudinal research undertakings or studies. Cross-sectional means only once, a snapshot in time, one time point, whereas longitudinal has this time axis, the before and after, the beginning and the end, included in the research methodology, very often as repeated measures, as I said, before and after, or it could be a time series, like for instance, serial surveys, the annual student satisfaction survey conducted at our university. Briefly on variable. Variables are any observation that can take on different values. Sounds abstract, could be something like age, glucose level, height, weight, things like that. And an attribute of a variable is the specific value of the variable. Let me illustrate some examples. Here we go. First variable is age. The attribute to it would be a number, 18, 19, 20, that is expressed in years.